What's up guys, MizzoFrizzo from Pitchfork Academy here, and in this Unreal Engine 5.6 tutorial I'm going to show you how to create start, run, and stop run animation states in your animation blueprint. So as you can see here, I've got this third person character, and when I start running and stop running, he's got these nice start, run, and stop run animations, which we're going to take straight from Lyra and use to drastically improve the locomotion animations, which in the third person template don't have the start move and stop move states, so they go straight from idle into running and back to idle. We're going to add the start run and stop run states, which if I put this into slow motion, you can see it's very smooth here with very little foot sliding. And we're even going to change our max acceleration and our braking deceleration at runtime to give you a bit more of a fluid feel, a bit more of a weighty feel to your character, and make everything very smooth and very natural and blend very well indeed. We are even going to dictate how far into our stop run animation it should start playing, depending on how fast we are moving. So as you can see here, if I start to move and then I stop to move very quickly, it will change how far into the stop running animation it will play, and it will have dynamic braking, deceleration based on how fast we're moving as well. So it's all very smooth, and if I change this back to full speed, you'll see this looks very clean and very smooth indeed, and everything blends and looks very nice indeed. But just before we get started, guys, if you like what we do here at Pitchfork Academy and you'd like to connect with more like-minded people, access to our Discord server, Mizzo's Dizzo, is available for just $1.50 per month via Patreon. The Discord server is becoming a pretty cool place to be. There's heaps of cool and very funny and very helpful and smart people, as well as an integrated AI chatbot to help you with your Unreal Engine 5 related questions. And your $1.50 per month goes towards that AI chatbot. It's actually a paid model, so it's very clever indeed, as well as helping to support us in what we do here at Pitchfork Academy. But without further ado, let me show you how to do this. Alrighty guys, now I'm here in my base project, and this might look a little bit different, but this is just the third person template from Unreal Engine 5.6. I've simply changed the level a little bit, and I've swapped the mesh out on my third person character for many. And what I'm going to do now is open up Project Megasample. If you're not aware of Project Megasample, I'll link the video about it in a card up the top right, as well as in the description and in the pinned comment. But I'm going to go ahead and open up Project Megasample, and because I'm working in Unreal Engine 5.6, I'm going to switch Unreal Engine version and make sure that this is 5.6, hit OK, and open this up. And now that I'm here in Project Megasample in 5.6, I'm looking for a few animations that we can use for our start and stop running. So we've got some unarmed ones in the Lyra folder, but I'm going to use the pistol animations. So I'm just going to search for pistol idle, and I'm going to take the pistol idle hipfire, which is right here. I'm going to right click on this one and asset actions migrate. And I only need the animation here, so I'm going to uncheck the characters folder and collapse that and make sure that I've just selected pistol idle hipfire and hit OK. And I'm going to navigate to my target projects project files and select the content folder and hit select folder. Now that that one has migrated, I'm also going to search pistol jog, and the ones I'm after are pistol jog forward, pistol jog forward stop, and pistol jog forward start. So I can select these three and right click, asset actions, and migrate. And once again, I only want these animations in the animation library folder and Lyra, so I can uncheck characters and collapse that and make sure that all that I've got checked are these three animations. Hit OK, And once again, navigate to your target projects folder and select the content folder, hit select folder, and those will migrate. I can go ahead and close project megasample now. And back in my project here, we can see that these have been imported because we've got the animation library folder and Lyra and the 4 animations that we imported. And if we go ahead and open up the pistol jog forward, we'll see that this animation has root motion enabled, which basically means that this animation will push the character forward through the level, and we don't really need that. So what we can do is scroll down here and uncheck enable root motion so that this animation is in place like so. We can save that and close that, and we're going to make sure that root motion is disabled on all of these animations. So disable root motion, save and close. And this stopping animation also has root motion, disable that, save and close. And this idle hip fire is obviously a stationary animation, so it doesn't have root motion enabled. Nice. And now that we've done that, we can go down to the third person folder and blueprints and open up BP third person character. And like I said, I'm working in the 5.6 third person template here, and all I've literally done is change the mesh to many, and actually I've moved the camera over a little bit as well to give me a sort of third person perspective. But otherwise, this blueprint remains unchanged. And what we're interested in here is the animation blueprint that's applied to the skeletal mesh, the character mesh here. So over here under anim class, you can see it's ABP underscore unarmed. We can hit this little browse icon and browse to the animation blueprint and open this up. And straight away in the event graph here, we're going to make a few changes. In 5.6, they sort of tacked on this strafe stuff and can strafe to the end of some of the code here. We're actually going to delete that and delete this here. We're not going to use that. And we're also going to delete this running speed and this division node here and plug vector length XY straight into ground speed. This is how it used to be set up in the template, and I don't really understand why they changed it. So we're just going to change it back. And we're also going to change the value on this greater than check on the ground speed here to 3, which is what it was set to previously in the template. This just makes everything a lot simpler and easier to work with. I don't really know why they're trying to overcomplicate things, but we'll take it back to what it was like in the previous templates, like so. And now that that's been done, I'll just quickly explain what's going on with this should move Boolean right here. So this variable is what dictates whether our animation blueprint can go from a idle state into a walk or running state, and then vice versa back into the idle state. So what this is checking is that if our ground speed is greater than some very small number, and we actually have some acceleration inputs, so our player is pressing one of the movement keys, then we should be able to move into a walk run state. And as this says here, it says set should move to true only if ground speed is above a small threshold to prevent incredibly small velocities from triggering animations. So you have to be moving over a very small amount and pressing some sort of movement key, and then this Boolean will be true. And this is important to note because this is the main variable that we're going to be using to transition to and from the states that we're going to make today. So with all that being said, let's head over to the anim graph, and where we're going to be working today is in this locomotion state machine. So if we open up the locomotion state machine, you'll see that we've got 2 states in here, idle and walk run, and these have the idle animation in here, and then walk run, if we open this up, you'll see it has a blend space, idle, walk run. So if we open this up and we hold control and hover over the graph down at the bottom here, you'll see that this is the blend space that basically blends between our walking animation and our running animation. but we're not going to use this blend space, and we're also not going to use this strafe variable because we've deleted the strafe variable from the event graph. So if we head back to the locomotion state machine here, we will delete this state and just create some new states. But just before we do, I want to draw your attention to these transitional rules right here. So these are the rules that, if they're satisfied, our animation blueprint can transition from this state to this state and start playing the animations that are within this state right here. So these, we can hover over these and see the transitional rule there. It says should move, and that denotes the Boolean variable should move. And if we hover over this one, it says not should move. We can also double click on these to enter, and basically this is where you plug in the rule that dictates whether it can enter that transition. And we've just got that should move Boolean right here. And if we look at the other one, it's got should move and a not Boolean. So if this Boolean is false, then we can enter that transition. But we're not going to use that state or these transitions, so let's just delete these, and we'll create our start run, our run, and our stop run states, and all of the transitions in between from scratch. So let's start by right-clicking here and adding a state, and this one we can call start run. Let's right-click again, add another state, and we'll call this one run. And once more, add another state, and we'll call this one stop run. And first, let's add transitions around like this. So from idle to start run to run, run to stop run, and stop run to idle. And apart from these 4 transitions, we'll need a couple more, because if we are in, for example, the stop run state and playing the stop run animation, and then we press a key and we start running again, we will either want to go to the start run state and play that animation, or straight back into the run state and start playing that animation. And we will set up these transitional rules in a moment. The other thing we want is also one from start run to stop run. And that's because if we've started running and this animation is not completed yet, and then we let go of the movement key, we want to also be able to go straight into the stop run state. But just before we add these transitional rules, let's go ahead and drop the animations into these states. So double click on start run, and right here we're going to look for our pistol jog forward start, and we'll drop this in here like so. Back out to the locomotion state machine, and we'll go into the run state, and here we want our pistol jog forward. We'll plug this in here and make sure that this one is set to looping over here in the details panel, so check loop animation, and we'll back out and go to stop run and drop in our pistol jog forward stop right here, and back out to the locomotion state machine. Now that those animations are in each of these states, let's start setting up these transition rules. So we'll just, for starters, work our way around the outside. So let's do idle to start run, and all idle to start run needs is the should move variable. So if should move is true, we should be able to transition from idle into starting to run. And then for start run to run, you can just single click on this transition, and we will use the automatic rule. So if you highlight this, if you hover over this, you'll see it says try setting the rule automatically based on most relevant asset player nodes remaining time and the automatic rule trigger time of the transition. So this basically means that when this animation is finished playing, we will transition into this state. If we select this transition and we check automatic rule, this will basically automatically happen when this animation is nearing the end. But the one thing we want to do here is give the blend settings a little bit of a longer duration, and we might need to play with this a little bit, but basically because we're blending 2 different running animations and we want it to look nice and smooth, let's make this duration on the blend time here 0.5. We might need to play with this, we might need to make it a little bit longer, but let's try 0.5 for now. The next transition is run to stop run, and this is just if should move is not true. So let's double click on this transition and we'll get our should move boolean. We'll get a not boolean. Plug this in here. So if should move is not true, then we can enter that transition. And from stop run to idle, once again, we can just click this transition and set it to automatic rule. And that should be absolutely fine. Now from start run to stop run, this one here, so if we've started running and this animation is still playing and then we let go of the movement key and we move straight into the stop run animation, this once again is just should not move. So we'll double click this one, grab our should move and a not boolean, plug this in here, and that is good to go. Now the only two left are stop run to start run and stop run to run. And because these are basically equally likely, we need a slightly different rule for each of these. So what we can do is we can use our should move boolean. So if we're stopping running, obviously should move has been set to false. So if we start moving again, we're going to move into either start run or run. And what we can use to sort of dictate which one is taken is how much time remaining on the animation in our stop run state. So let's double click on this one here, and this is our stop run to start run rule. And what we can do is we can get our should move boolean, and we'll get an and boolean, plug this in here. And if we right click here, we can search for time remaining and find time remaining ratio, pistol jog forward stop. So if we select this one and we hover over this, you'll see it says get the time as a fraction of the asset length of the animation. So basically, if this animation is starting, the ratio is 0, and if it's finished, the ratio is 1. So it's basically a fraction of the total length of that animation. So what we can do is check that this is less than something like 0.5, which is about halfway through the animation, and plug this in here. And just in case you want to fiddle with this amount, what we can do is promote this to a variable, and we'll call this something like time left to start running, something like that. So if we compile now, this should have a default value of whatever you put in here, so 0.5. Make sure this has a default value so that you can just change this if you want to play around with this. So basically, if our stop running animation is less than halfway through, then we are going to transition straight back into the start running animation. But if our stop run animation has more than half of the animation remaining, so less than halfway through the animation, then we'll transition into the run state. So what we can actually do is just grab all this stuff here and Control C it, and I'll go back to this one right here, paste this in, plug this in, and we'll change this to a greater equal. So this might sound a little bit confusing, but just one more time for clarity. If the time remaining on our jog forward stop is greater or equal to half of the animation, so if it's in the first half of the animation and we start moving again, then we'll transition into the run animation. But if there's less than half of the animation remaining, so it's towards the end of our stop run animation and we start moving again, it will transition into the start run state. And now these animations will be working now, and all of these states will successfully transition to one another, but the default character movement settings in the third person template leave a little bit to be desired, basically because there is no start or stop run states in the template. It has very high acceleration by default and very high braking deceleration. So what we can do is we can go back to our third person character blueprint and select the character movement component. And basically what we're going to do is play with the max acceleration here and the braking, deceleration, walking down here. So I'm going to change the max acceleration to just something a little bit lower, like 1250. And I'm also going to change the braking, deceleration, walking to something much, much lower, about 800. And that's because, as I said, there is no stop running or stop walking animation or state in the third person template. So this very high braking deceleration, the default 2000, is very, very high, just so our character just basically stops moving as soon as you let go of the movement key. But this will feel much more weighty and natural. This is much closer to what you'll get in a lot of, third person action adventure games and whatnot. So we can try out our animations with these simple changes, but in a moment I'm going to show you how to dynamically change the braking deceleration and the max acceleration at runtime to sort of give your character an even more fluid feel. But first, let's just try out what we've got so far. And to make this a little bit easier to visualize, what we might do is go to the event graph, and I'm just going to find some empty space, and I'm going to set up a very quick and hacky way to basically give us some slow motion so we can see how much foot sliding and whatnot our character is getting. So I'm going to right click here, and I'm going to find the tab key, and on press of tab I'm going to flip flop, and I'm going to set global time dilation. I'll duplicate this, whoops. And so the first time that we press tab, we'll change this to something like 0.1. And the next time we press tab, we'll change it back to 1. And then this will basically toggle between slow-mo and normal speed. We can hit compile now and press play. And now we can have a little run around. I'll full screen this, and I'm going to press tab to give me slow-mo. And we're basically just looking at how much the feet are sliding, and also the blend between start run and stop running there. There's a little bit of foot sliding going on in the stop run, and I also suspect there's a bit of a blending problem between start run and run. And it doesn't look too bad, actually. It's a bit hard to tell if there's a problem with blending or if it's just the animations. But the feet are sliding a fair bit with that stop running animation. And we can make all of this look a lot smoother. Just trying to check for that blend between start run and run. It doesn't actually look too bad with that half a second blend time. But I might just go to my start run to run here and bump up this blend duration to like 0.7 or something like that. And that should be really quite smooth. But a couple of things we can do to make this a lot more fluid and dynamic and look very smooth and natural indeed is by changing the max acceleration and the braking deceleration, along with a couple of other things at runtime to sort of dictate, for example, when our stop run animation starts playing, or to be more specific, how far into our jog forward stop animation should it start playing. So I'm talking about this start position right here. So by default, when we enter this state, the start position of the animation is at the start of the animation at 0. But what we can do over here on start position is click this drop down and expose this as a pin. And then we can basically set this start position at runtime. So let's drag off of here and promote this to a variable. And I'll just call this stop run anim start position, something like that. So we're going to set this, and it will dictate how far into this animation this should start playing when we do enter this state. So let's head back out to the event graph, and basically where we're going to be working here is on the end of ground speed here, and we'll add some stuff to this set should move functionality right here. So I'm going to grab this bottom section and just drop it down a bit and make a bit more space in this section here. And I'm also going to grab this top section and move it up a little bit and create a bit more space like so. And let's go ahead and change our max acceleration at runtime. So up here on Event Blueprint Initialize Animation, a reference to the character movement component is created. So we can just grab under components here in the variables tab, the movement component, we can pull that out, and then we can use this to set the max acceleration like so. We'll plug this in here. And what we're going to use to calculate the max acceleration is a map range clamped. So we can drag off of here and find a map range clamped. And basically, if you're not familiar with these, what they do is they take a value input here, which is going to be our ground speed. And then you can sort of tell it in what range it should expect this value, and it will sort of convert the return value into an output range. If that makes any sense. So for example, if this value was 0 to 1, you could put 0 to 1 here, and then you can make it output whatever you want. Something, let's say 250 to 500. So if this value was 0, then it would output 250. And if this value was 1, it would output 500. And all relatively within that range. So just to make this a bit simpler, let's make this 200 and let's make this 400, right? So 0 would be 200 and 1 would be 400. If this was 0.5, then this would come out as 300. So sort of where it falls in this range is exactly where the output would fall in this range, if that makes any sense. So the default walk speed of our character is 600. So we're going to make this 0 to 600. And we're basically going to have a higher amount of max acceleration the faster we are going. Now it's only going to be very slight, but it just means that our character will accelerate more slowly from a standstill. And if they're already moving, they'll accelerate a little bit faster. Now, just to double check what we made the default, the character movement in our third person character, we made the max acceleration 1250. So let's go ahead and make the out range A here 1250. And let's just bump it up to something like 1350 at full speed at 600. So this is very, very slight, but basically it means if we're already moving, we should be able to accelerate a little bit faster. And it means we'll have a sort of dynamic acceleration. So as we start moving, we'll accelerate faster and faster up to our top speed, and it will have a bit more of a weighty and fluid feel. And you can play around with these numbers, but for the purposes of this tutorial, this is going to do just fine. The other thing we want to do is basically set our braking deceleration and that stop, run, anim start position here that we created right here when we set our should move. So instead of just setting should move straight off of this and boolean, what we can do is disconnect this and move this over a little bit. And I'm going to drag off of the and boolean here and press B to get a branch. I'll plug in the execution pin into that branch. And then what we can do is basically check what should move is set to so that we can change these figures anytime should move changes. So if these are both true and should move needs to be true, we can just go ahead and set that to true. But anytime these are false, we basically want to check what should move is currently set to so that we can change these braking deceleration figures and whatnot. So what we can do is get should move from our variables tab here. And I believe this is new in 5.6. We can right click on this and convert this to a branch and just use this. If you're using an older version of Unreal Engine, you might need to get should move and drag off of it and press B to get a branch and use a branch. But we're just going to use this because it's a little bit cleaner. So if either of these are false, then this will ring false. And if should move is already false, then we don't need to do anything. We can literally just continue to set it as false, like so. But if either of these are false and should move needs to be set to false, and it hasn't already, so it's true, what we'll do is we'll set it to true, but just before we do, we'll set our other variables that we want to change as well. So let's just create a function, and we'll just call it calculate stop data or something like that. And I'm going to head back out to the event graph, and I'm going to make sure that I call that function right here before I set should move to true. So I hope this makes sense to you. If should move needs to be set to false, and it hasn't already, then we're going to set these variables that we want to set, and then we will set it to false, and make sure you uncheck this one. So these down here, these will both be false, and up here we're setting it to true. So let's head into calculate stop data, and the first thing we can do in here is change our braking deceleration. So once again, we can get the movement component here and get it, and we can set braking deceleration walking. And walking is just the normal movement mode when you're walking or running on the ground, as opposed to flying or swimming or something like that. So we can plug this in here, and right here, once again, we can get a map range clamped. And once again, the input value is going to be our ground speed. So we'll get ground speed and plug it in there. And once again, this goes from 0 to 600, which is our max walking speed by default in the third person template. And let's go back to our third person character and double check what we set our braking deceleration walking to. We set it to 800. And basically what we want to do here is kind of the opposite of our max acceleration. So the faster we are going, the less braking deceleration we want to have. We want it to be easier to stop the more slowly you are moving, if that makes any sense. So if we're moving at our full 600, I think it's centimeters per second, we'll select outrange B and we'll set this to 800, which is our default. But if we're moving slowly or close to 0, we'll make this much, much higher. Let's make it double. So 1600, like so. And once again, you can play around with these figures, but basically this is how quickly your character will decelerate when you let go of a movement key, if that makes any sense. And the last thing we want to do in here is change our stop, run, anim, start position. So we can hold Alt and click and drag this out like so, plug in the execution pin. And let's also just duplicate this map range clamped and the ground speed variable, because we're going to use the exact same thing on this one. And once again, 0 to 600, but the out range is going to dictate at what point our stop run animation will start playing. How far through that animation will it start playing? So if we are at our full 600 walk speed, I'm going to make this 0. So if we're moving as fast as possible, the stop run animation will start at the very beginning of the animation. And basically, I'm going to put the outrange A as something very close to the full duration of that animation. So just to double check how long that animation is, we can go to our content browser, find the animation here, and our pistol jog forward stop. We can hover over that, and then down near the bottom there, you'll see the sequence length is 1.2. So this animation is 1.2 seconds long. So I'm going to set this to something like 1.15. Sorry, 1.15. So very close to the animation's end. If we are moving at 0 when we stop running, so we won't be much above this, we might be very, very low, like say 10. then the stop run animation will start playing almost at the very end of that animation. And that should be just about it, guys. These animations should look very, very good now. If we go back to our anim graph and locomotion, we've got our different states here, and we've got a little bit more sophisticated sort of transition rules, depending on when we're stopping. If we're stop running, how far into this animation it will start playing. And then if we start running again, how far through that animation are we? And should we go back to a start run animation, or should we go straight back into running? So if we hit play now, and I'll full screen this, and we start running around, I'll try it at full speed first and just see how it feels. And it feels very good and looks very smooth indeed. I don't see, there is a bit of a transition between our start run and our stop run our start run and our running animation. There is a transition there, so we need to iron that out. And we do have a fairly long blend time on that, but I'm going to show you one more trick for blending locomotion assets very, very smoothly, and it's called sync groups. So if we have a look at these animations, these Lyra animations, for example, the jog forward, and open this up, we can see that in the timeline down here, we have this notify track, and it has this L, R, L, R. And what these are sync markers. So if I pause this and I move through this animation, what this is doing is putting a marker right in the middle of the stride, so where the feet are crossing over here, and then we move further through, and then this one is for the right foot, and this one is for the left foot, and so on and so forth. And what these do is allow an animation like this to blend with an animation such as our jog forward start, which also has these sync markers right here. Once again, this one is for when the right foot is basically under the pelvis. So if you were to transition from this animation into the jog forward, it would basically line these up so that the left foot and the right foot are synced. And as you saw when we tested this out, that's not really happening. And that's because these animations are from Lyra, and they do use the sync group with these sync markers in Lyra, but it has not been activated in this project yet. We have the sync markers here, but they're not being used. So just before I show you how to activate these sync groups, I'll also show you how to create these sync markers if your animations don't have them already. So you'll need a notify track. So you can add a notify track if you don't have one already. You can see this is added, this notify track 4 right here. And then what you want to do is basically go through your animations. And if it's a start run animation, you probably don't want, markers here at the very start. You want them to be more sort of in here when he's already running. So that's why this first one is here. So you want to check when the right foot plants, and maybe you want to do it when it's right under the pelvis or something like that, and the feet are crossing over. Then you can right click on the notify track and add a sync marker. And now these are here because they already exist in these animations, but what you could do is just go new sync marker, and you might call it left, or left foot plant, whatever you want to call it, or just L and R. Sorry, this one's on the right foot. This should be right. So I'll just move this one to here, and you can just click them and drag them around to move them where you want. And you could also create one here by going add sync marker, new sync marker, call it right. And then once you've created them, you can add these same sync markers in any other animation. So I'll show you that in a moment, but very quickly, I also want to show you how to add multiple of these. So if I wanted to add all of my right sync markers, I could click this one, press Control C to copy, and then I'll move the timeline to the next point where I want a right foot sync marker, and then I can just click on that notify track and press Control V to paste. Oh, that hasn't really worked correctly. It was working for me this morning. If I go to another right foot here, maybe I can just right click and paste. Yeah, that's probably the easiest way, is just right click and paste. So once again, I could click left, Control C to copy, and then go to where I want a left foot marker, right click and paste, and it will paste that in. Now, I'm not going to use these ones. I'm going to use the ones that already exist in these animations from Lyra. But basically, once you've created them, you could open up any other animation, and then you could right click on a notify track and add sync marker, and those sync markers will already be there. So if I added this one to a different animation, it would sync that animation with this animation using these sync markers, if that makes any sense. Now, I'm just going to delete all of these because we're not going to use them, but I will show you how to activate these sync markers and actually make use of them. So just once more to reiterate, I want to point out that this start animation, if I hit slow-mo here, this start animation is not blending properly with the run animation. He'll do a little kind of scissor kick here at some point. Be about now. Oh, I think I missed it. Or it was still coming maybe. Yeah, so see there, his feet kind of float, and there's a weird transition. Let's have a look what this looks like with sync markers activated. So we can go to our animation blueprint, and if we select our start run state and go in here and select this start run animation, you'll see in the details panel we've got this sync section right here, and the method is set to do not sync. So we want to change this to sync group, and then we want to give the group name a name. So let's just call it default, something like that. And I will Control C that name so I don't need to type it again. And we'll leave the group role as can be leader. There might be situations, you can conceive of situations where you might want to change this to always follower or always leader. I'm not going to go into all these different group roles for now. I'm just basically introducing you to sync groups. So we're going to leave it as can be leader. Make sure method is set to sync group and give it a group name, and Control C the name. And then we can back out to locomotion and select our run state, select our jog forward, and we'll change the method to sync group, paste in that group name. And now, because both of these animations have sync markers and they're both using the sync group default, they should sync now with the left and right foot sync markers. And it does seem to have fixed that transition rather well. Just going to have a quick look and double check that there's nothing strange going on here with the blending. There is not. That is very, very smooth indeed. So even with the longer blend time, it didn't really work to blend the animation smoothly. They need the sync group to be able to make it seamless from start run into running. And you can see that that is totally seamless now. And we've got very little foot sliding with our start run, our run, and our stop run. Nice, the feet are planting pretty firmly on the ground there with all of our animations. And we can do a little bit of testing here where we start running and then stop running immediately. And that also looks really, really smooth. I'm very, very happy with that. So depending on how fast we're moving is how far into the stop animation it starts playing, and also how quickly our character decelerates. Braking deceleration is being changed dynamically, as well as max acceleration and the time into that stop animation that it starts playing. Very, very smooth indeed. Guys, that's it. If this tutorial has been of any use or value to you whatsoever, please hit like and subscribe, and I will see you on the next one.